Right, so we're ready to get going, right?
Yep.
All right. So let's open up with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everybody to Nargan County again. Starting to think you guys like it.
Nice.
Another beautiful day for a drive. So perfect. All right, let's open up with roll call.
Give me another second. I'm Nelson haywire.
I'll do it. DOT,
Present.
Buffalo, IOTA, Erie County,
Present.
Niagara County,
Here.
Niagara Falls,
Present.
the Thruway,
Here.
downtown. Very good. All are present.
All right, very good. So next we have the approval of meeting agenda. Everybody has an agenda in front of them.
That's yes.
Erie County seconds.
Great. Motion made and seconded. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Ooh. Meeting minutes. Have to flip those over.
Erie County makes a motion to accept the meeting minutes as is.
Niagara Falls full second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right, are we ready for communications?
We need a couple minutes.
All right, well, why don't we move on to public participation? Doug?
Yeah, Doug Punky, Citizens Regional Transit. I wanted to point out to everybody, the New York State DOT Transportation Master Plan. This just came out in June. It's a very good report, and it has a lot of very important information. It has a late 20th century to today vision, calls for removing highways, a lot of things that are happening, and it calls for prioritizing the environment. It has a vision for doing that. It mentions the Rochester highway removal that was done as an example. It mentions the Syracuse done. It doesn't say anything about Buffalo, and we hope that'll get added as well. The Kensington either downgraded or removed as part of this as well as the Skajakwita. So I guess I just encourage everybody to take a look at the visions and the guidelines in this report just came out, and hopefully we'll be able to follow it as part of the moving forward on the Kensington Expressway project. It also calls for as a priority community outreach too, so that's an important part of it. So anyway, we look forward to working with DOT and everybody else and making this project come out. Good. Thank you.
There. Anybody else with a comment? Anybody online?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, we're ready.
so we're good for, all right, we'll go back to communications report then.
All right. Thank you everyone for your patience. So for August 2025, a very quiet month for us. As community engagement, we had our PCC meeting in August. For stakeholder engagement, we had the senior staff meeting with the Ministry of Transportation of Ontario, MTO. Public notices that were sent out were the PCC meetings that we are, if you have sending out, giving RTC news and updates emails that try to encompass our updates, but also our member updates and any updates that come in more frequently for us. In the news, there was only one article that came up, Buffalo Rising article about the DLNW terminal development. As far as public commentary, we had two. We had one sharing from Haiti Whitmer. It was an email sharing concern over the request to delay the 2026-2030 TIP vote. That was answered. And then we also had one for the TIP amendment number 42 that came in, that was also answered as an email. As far as our information for website and social media, followers have gone up about 2 to 3 points across the board. LinkedIn still being at the highest with 9 additional followers. So you see the stats up there. The top post was the 18-mile Creek Greenway project and Northtown Community Trails project post that was on Facebook, and the PCC policy invite post that was essentially the most liked across the board. Our website pages and visits has not changed much from last month, so there's not a lot of things going on there. And that pretty much sums it up for the month of August.
So there. All right, let's move on to action items.
Thank you. Go to the next slide, please. So just one tip modification to talk about this morning. This is pin 581539, Elm Oak, Swan Street to Goodell, downtown Buffalo. This is a NISDOT request to modify an existing tip project. Costs will be increased due to ADA ramps and additional signal work. That will increase the cost of the project by roughly $3 million. We have the breakdown between construction and construction inspection there. Construction over 2.6 million and construction inspection at 383,000. Constraint is being maintained as the same amount, roughly $3 million will be transferred from an existing pavement maintenance block fund, not fine. That is unchanged at 925. This action was presented at TPS on 820 and recommended for approval. Anything to add from DOT?
Nope. Not at all.
All right, that for today's PCC action would be to recommend a cost increase for approval.
DOT makes a motion to approve.
Cindy Buffalo Center.
All right, motion made and seconded. Anybody have any comments on this project? Any other questions? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right, Kelly.
Are you driving?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very good.
I got worse than.
Okay, no, I didn't know if we were changing or not. Good morning, everybody. We're excited to be here this morning to present the final draft of the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. I'm joined this morning by Josh McLean from UV Regional Institute. He heads up their sustainability and resilience team over there. UVRI has been our consultant since the beginning of this project back in 2023. So we're excited. This is the second key deliverable of this project. This morning, we want to go through the major components of the plan. We really appreciate the feedback received from members of this committee, along with folks from the One Region Forward Implementation Council, which serves as the steering group for the CRPG initiative. So we've got about 30 slides for you. I'm going to kick us off, hand it over to Josh about midway through, but just again, go over the major components. And, if questions come up along the way and you want to ask, feel free to do so as we get going. So we can go to the next slide. What we have here in terms of the grant, just by way of review, we kicked off back in November of 2023 and launched right into the Priority Climate Action Plan. So again, this grant is designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our 2-county area. It was an accelerated planning process, if you recall. So in that first initial 6 months or so, we really benefited from the wealth of work already underway in the region, building off of the One Region Forward plan and that climate action and mitigation section there. And then bringing in the great work done by Erie County and their comprehensive climate action plan, City of Buffalo's climate action planning efforts now into their own formal plan, as well as many of the communities across the 2-county area that participated in NYSERDA's either Clean Energy Communities program or the Climate Smart Communities efforts too. So bringing all those pieces together for the PCAP, raising up those kind of already determined regional priorities and focusing on some of the projects and plans underway at the time to reduce emissions in our region. So setting that foundation. We're now in the second part here, representing the development of the comprehensive plan. And so again, going over that today, the action before the committee today being permission to go forward with 30-day public review, so that we can get that feedback, finalize the plan and get it to EPA by the December 1st deadline of this year. So this plan looks out to 2050. Following the submission to EPA, we would move on, looking forward to phase 3. So between the end of this year and out to the fall of 2027, it moves us into a monitor, reporting, and implementation phase, helping to facilitate efforts, track those efforts, culminating in a CCAP, Comprehensive Climate Action Plan status report for EPA due to them in the fall of 27 at the conclusion of the grant. So how did we get to today? Just kind of a recap of work underway that came together to formulate the draft. So with the PCAP, in February of 2024, we really spent the remainder of last year working on the updated greenhouse gas inventory for Erie and Niagara counties. So a great resource that's now available. If you recall, the previous inventory was done back in 2010. So taking advantage of recent data, updated methods in terms of quantifying emissions, with guidance from EPA along with New York State. We also were able to update the One Region Forward report card of project indicators. And so those two pieces at the top there really gave us a great foundation to kick off and launch into our engagement efforts at the beginning of this year, really having that baseline foundation of understanding where we are as a region when it comes to emissions, and going out and talking with the community. So I'll talk a little bit more about our overall engagement process, but that also incorporated bringing back our sector work groups that were formed under the PCAP process that we brought back for the CCAP as well. And then kind of taking all those pieces to assemble the plan, which really geared up in kind of June and into July to bring together the initial draft that was circulated last month. So, and with the hope of going forward with public review next. So this just gives you a high level of what's included in the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan. So setting that regional context, again, this is a regional plan focusing on, the emissions, key emissions in our region and how to tackle those going forward, and providing a framework. So setting kind of these 10 big actions as a roadmap for helping to reduce emissions going forward, and a framework for implementation. And so we're really excited about this toolkit that Josh is going to talk more about at the end of the presentation to really give people and key stakeholder groups, because just given the whole transfer over of our energy economy, it's, as we all know, very complex. There's a lot of different roles to play across these sectors, and we certainly know transportation around this table, housing to some degree for some of our partners, but it's very broad. And then lastly, just another slate of performance metrics that we'll review to help us track our progress of how we're doing over time. So the PCAP, I've already talked about it a little bit, but just want to stress that, again, with this complexity of the energy economy transfer, the idea of promoting and facilitating collaboration to really help move some of these actions forward as we get into the implementation phase. So with that priority plan, the inventory, the updated indicators, we launched into our community engagement for this plan, for the comprehensive plan. And much of our sort of public engagement was centered around this Buffalo Niagara Climate Challenge game. I think some folks here played it. It was kind of a unique new way of engaging folks from all sectors across the region in a gamified form to create a little competition, but taking a meaty subject that's comprehensive, a little dry for some, and kind of breaking it down into a game format. So You see some of the pictures here. It covered all of the sectors outlined in the plan, and gave specific kind of strategies and actions that the teams of four could take to reduce greenhouse gases in our region. But it was educational in the fact that not only did it call out particular actions that would work well for us. We know that transportation is the highest emitter at 41% of all our emissions, for example. But what types of actions would give us the biggest bang for our buck into reducing emissions? But certain treatments, certain actions cost more than others. So it was really kind of weighing cost benefit analysis and across all the different types of things that you could do, from waste reduction, transportation improvements, energy and housing retrofits and the like. So 80 teams in total, nearly 400 participants. And if we go to the next slide, we'll just give you sort of a breakdown. It was exciting, sort of just the range of folks that ended up playing the game, kind of from high school students up to university level classes, but community-based nonprofits like Waterkeeper to private sector folks like Delaware North. So kind of getting those different lenses and their input as part of the community engagement process. Next. We also reached out to key municipal stakeholders and community-based nonprofits already kind of engaged in this work in the two-county area. And this is where our climate planning forum came into play. It was a half-day event held at UB back in May. And it was a great event in terms of sort of just peer sharing, knowledge exchange for folks involved in this work, subject matter experts from the state level, sharing information about funding opportunities, but also kind of best practices, what things have worked, but also messaging, what messagings have come across when you're involved in this work for different constituencies that you may be engaged with, or different parts, whether it be urban, rural, suburban constituents, and different types of GHG emission initiatives. And then again, our sector-based work groups. So we combined housing and commercial buildings into one, just given we want to be respectful of folks' time, and there was a lot of crossover there. But these 6 sector-based work groups, we bought them back from the PCAP process, and then also put a call out in case we missed anybody that first time around. And if members of the existing group knew of other folks, we should invite in to help us with the development of the actions, measures and projections. So this is the actual table of contents. Again, your pretty typical table of contents, but again, a summary at the beginning, setting that table for our region in the context for Erie and Niagara counties, talking in depth and outlining the engagement that took place for the reader, and then incorporating that GHG inventory as a requirement of EPA. And then from there, doing an overview of our projections for GHG and reduction scenarios that Josh is going to talk about, outlining the 10 big moves to get us there, and the toolkit, along with data sources and notes at the end. So I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, transportation is our biggest emitter. But then if you take transportation coupled with residential and commercial energy, we're kind of up and over half of the emissions in the two-county region for us. So thinking that and keeping that in mind, that kind of really factored in when we were thinking about the 10 overall actions and the best things to be prioritizing in our neck of the woods for helping to reduce emissions looking out to 2050, recognizing that there's work to be done and moving the needle in the right direction in all of these areas, including agriculture, waste, industry, that do produce lower emissions, but there's still room for improvement there. So again, our 10 big actions, and as we talked about sort of with transportation, and the energy we use to power, heat, and cool our residential and commercial buildings, the ones on the sort of left side of the screen, factor in and kind of cover those sectors, and then on the right side of the screen, the other 5 kind of covering the other key sectors of agriculture, industry, and waste, and power generation. just to outline sort of in each of the key areas how the plan is organized, we took in each area and kind of had 4 subsections. So we introduce what the action is, what it is and why, talk about the impact. So if it were to be implemented and we make progress, what would that GHG reduction look like? Improvements to air quality and potential other benefits that come along with that. Big steps to take, sort of that roadmap for getting there for stakeholders and interested parties. And then, timeline and milestones. So, what do we need to hit by 2030, 2050? Those were the milestone timeframes set by EPA. And then sort of the key data points that we'll be using to track it. Again, coming back to cost benefit. So in each of the sections with the actions and the steps, there's kind of a quantified cost that's taken into account. So some things might bring us big reductions in emissions, but can we afford them at this time? And just thinking that through for implementation. So we're at actions. I'm just going to talk about the transportation ones and then hand it over to Josh to take us home. But we've talked about this a lot in our long range plan, but again, stressing the need to be ready for that energy transition for low to zero emission car vehicles, whatever they may be. Low to zero is kind of the broader term that's accepted more widely, more accessible to the public. Also is kind of what our CRPG grantee peers have been using. I think in your world, Darren, it might be low to no emissions. So again, we can talk about that, but we've left it in here in the initial draft as low to zero emissions. But again, when we've talked about charging infrastructure, where it's located, whether it be at workplaces, park and rides, places that people are going to spend a few hours, just recognizing that I think these are the consensus is these are steps that we need to get there, and recognizing too that the timeline may be changing just in terms of different political landscapes and priorities, but noting that these are the steps that have risen through their engagement processes and research that will make us ready. And we can't talk about transportation without land use. I know I'm a broken record here, but stressing the need for smart growth, compact forms of development, walkable forms of development to reduce vehicle miles traveled or on-road travel, kind of a more accessible term for folks, giving people more options and ways to get around. So this is kind of a metric that we have in our One Region Forward report card. We've struggled to get moving in the right direction since adoption in 2015. So important to highlight that and raise that up in this work. In terms of getting there, continuing to build infrastructure or re-envision infrastructure that we have to make it better for all types of transportation and forms of mobility. Implementing and moving forward with the TOD planning efforts that we worked on with NFTA, Metro Rail corridor, now exciting that the Valley BRT corridor is moving forward. Are there other opportunities? And not just in the city of Buffalo. So when we're talking about TOD and implementing some of these measures, there's not exactly one size fits all, but these types of practices can be helpful for towns and villages to offer better ways, improving first last mile connections to existing transit, even though it might not be as prevalent in certain locations as it is in the city, but ways to enhance it nonetheless. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you. Take us home. Yeah.
So as Kelly mentioned, these are sort of, I think starting with the third of our 10 big actions, and these are conceived of as like the big buckets, and then what's on the right are really, and there's a bit more depth in the plan itself in terms of what does that mean if you're doing that at a local government level, and local government in particular, but other actors as well, and then who would be the responsible parties. And so hopefully you've had a chance to look at those, but the third one around particularly focused on residential buildings and our housing stock is to, at a large scale to activate efforts to improve home efficiency and reduce carbon emitting energy sources from the region's housing stock. So, improving efficiency and then electrifying, because, flipping it around, you can lose a lot of electricity if you got leaky houses. So, and the steps in that process kind of follow a sequence where providing for home energy audits, find out what's going on in any given house and where the opportunities to make improvements might be. And then helping to make homes ready for electrification, which could be insulation, doors, windows, structural repairs, those type of things, so that when you're electrifying, it can happen more efficiently. Pulling local contractors in on this process. I think, we've had lots of stories about, both really good contractors and folks who, maybe there was a missed opportunity there to do something more on the side of energy efficiency because the contractors either weren't interested or didn't know about some of the programs out there. Complicated a little bit by recent tweaks to the Empower Plus program with NYSERDA, but I think that the action itself is still, all the more important because of that. Leveraging emerging technologies, staying on top of building technologies as they're developing, and especially connecting into our local entrepreneurial ecosystem. Launching neighborhood-based pilots for home retrofits, so trying to build efficiency in terms of how we go about projects by doing, identifying key areas for that. Maybe akin in certain ways to Push's green development zone on the west side of Buffalo. And then advocating for, ongoing funding to reduce those upfront costs for home. And then, so this one is really focused on new construction, both of commercial and residential buildings, and helping, those developers to comply with the state's requirements that are, new buildings over the next number of years be all entirely electrified. So encouraging municipalities to adopt the New York State stretch code for building, which is about, roughly 10% more energy efficient than the standard energy code, but is, implemented on a voluntary basis. Leading the way with construction of public facilities, kind of thinking like that's a great way you get people coming into those buildings and can really be a showcase for, building efficiency and electrification, including, schools and other public institutions. Then, the third one is really focused on what we can do with zoning, permitting, land use planning to make within a community to make it very consistent and transparent across the board for those developers. And then finally, continuing to add new financing tools for decarbonized building projects, leveraging what's out there already like PACE and energy performance contracts and things like that, but also, keeping an ear to the ground for new opportunities as well. Then this is specific to our commercial buildings and like our existing commercial buildings. Again, starting with that process of energy benchmarking, so helping firms to have a sense for their energy use and tracking that over time, and then developing energy monitoring plans and plans to reduce energy use. The second one is really specific to providing support for small businesses and, restaurants in particular, many of whom, may be leasing their space. We want to provide, similar to focusing on homeowners, focus on, where there's a lot of quantity and, relatively less capacity or bandwidth to take on those projects amongst the owners. And then finally, implementing district and campus-wide decarbonization strategies. This can include thermal energy networks, which, there's some opportunities for those in a campus-type setting. And so we want to leverage those as well. Then getting into our industrial sector, the idea here, framed pretty generally, to reduce pollution and carbon emissions from industrial production. That can be done through, encouraging municipal ordinance to minimize emissions from high energy users, including data centers. That was something we heard a lot in the planning process, was just kind of like, how do we begin to plan for, the new normal of, computing centers, and, providing some tools for that. Expanding the use of demand management and energy management planning. That kind of goes back to what we've seen in our other measures around sort of measuring and planning for use, that can kind of include those load shifting programs as well for industry. And then using zoning and incentives to promote industrial practices with energy and environmental benefits. So again, tapping into opportunities to provide funding and incentives for those firms, and then using our local land use and zoning to support that. Strengthening. So this one, the red is our waste industry. So we're getting sort of into those areas where the emissions, as you saw, are sort of smaller. But there's still some great opportunities, and many of those also have the benefit of sort of pulling in our residents and the public in some of these actions. One of them that we heard quite a lot about is the interest in composting at the municipal level, which is obviously kind of complicated in terms of the costs and the programs that go into that. But supporting the idea that there could be there could be curbside, there could be drop-offs, and any number of other things that can kind of help have that happen in each community. We also want to support laws and programs to phase out single-use plastics as a piece of the waste stream, really focusing on sort of the life cycle emissions of those products, both in terms of how they're produced and then when they're sitting in a landfill potentially. The third, we heard directly from some of our waste industry partners that some of the best ways to reduce waste or reduce emissions for waste is just to make our landfills as efficient as possible. So we talked about landfill gas capture and being able to reuse that gas whenever possible. And then cultivating a culture of waste consciousness. We've got some great advocates in the region talking about sort of like we just needing to reduce wastefulness overall, and sort of at the level of public engagement, getting people thinking about some of those issues of reuse and reduction. Then we get into our agriculture sector, again, one of the smaller sectors. And I think one of the key things we heard in our conversations with folks about this sector is like, it's hard to run a farm these days. And so I think we really tried to frame the agricultural actions in terms of things that we could do that hopefully would improve farm viability versus putting additional demands or constraints on farms. But so we started with providing incentives for sustainable farm production. There's many that are already out there, so we want to continue to build on those. Similarly, provide for the second one is more specific to livestock operations and supporting. Most of those emissions are coming from manure management as well as like the enteric fermentation from cattle. And so that's a tricky one. That's the cow burps and farts. That's not an easy emissions to reduce, but especially in terms of the manure management, there's good options there. And so we want to especially turning some of that waste, the methane and gas from the breakdown of that, there's the opportunity to turn that into energy. And so ideas like that can kind of help support farm viability as well. And then tying in the urban agriculture system quite a few times that like this is a part of our agricultural system now, and we don't want to necessarily treat it in silos from our more rural based agriculture. And then this action sort of stands a little bit alone in terms of the sense of adding carbon sequestration. So instead of focus on reducing emissions, we're talking about increasing carbon storage in our natural areas, as well as restoring our urban tree canopy that also can store carbon. So, things like supporting land conservation initiatives like the Western New York Wildway, amongst others, is a place to start. And then integrating land protection and green infrastructure into planning and zoning. So conserving, natural spaces, wetlands, and, beginning to use green infrastructure that also supports that work. And then, this one, continuing to restore the urban tree canopy as well. And this is the last of our 10 big actions, which really sort of supports and sort of undergirds the rest of the actions, is to build a more electric grid that is resilient and has the capacity. When we're talking about doing all this electrification work, we need a grid that can deliver that energy efficiently, and then increasing the supply of renewable energy that's being transferred within that grid. So starting with brownfields and using land with limited, redevelopment values, trying to target our renewable energy generation to those sites. Then building a diversity of renewable energy resources at different scales and of different types, and tying that together with battery energy storage to increase resilience. Again, deploying thermal energy networks for larger facilities and campus, including, capturing their waste energy and being able to reuse that as, for heating. And then, the last one is really to work with our regional utilities and the ISO to expedite the permitting for renewable energy processes and grid interconnections. We've heard a number of times that that's always a sticking point, that you'll have, renewable energy projects in the pipeline that kind of get hung up on permitting. And so we wanted to lift that up as a challenge and hopefully an opportunity. So this is kind of a recap of our regional GHG emissions. That'll be sort of presented before the actions in the plan, but we also sort of wanted to just highlight that as we talk about how we presented the projections for emissions in our region, as well as sort of working towards a target, which was some of the requirements of the CCAP. A little bit tricky in the sense of, our region, we as sort of the planning body don't have a ton of authority to say, hey, here's our new regional target, but we also wanted to come up with something that made sense in terms of a talking point for the plan. So you can go on to the next one. You can skip to that. So, one of the requirements of the plan is to present different scenarios for future emissions. So we sort of tried to lay this out fairly simply and in a straightforward way. We came up with three scenarios, and the no action, these are all based sort of on previous levels of emissions in our region. So a no action scenario would be if we continued emitting at the rate that we were emitting, from 1990 to 2005, and that would actually lead to a slight increase in emissions annually from year to year. That's not where we want to be heading. Then sort of our current trend is close to a 1% annual reduction, across all of these sectors in terms of what we've accomplished over the last 15 years, so 2010 to 2025. And then the doubling down scenario, which, hopefully we're working in that direction, would be if we were as a region across these sectors able to double our current pace of emissions reductions. So that would be, leading to about a 1.6% annual reduction over these 25 years. And this is kind of how we've laid it out in the plan. You can see our three scenarios, a slight increase, the 12.7, that's our starting point, our million metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And the numbers here would be sort of our end point following these three different scenarios. So at that doubling down scenario, we would be at less than half of our existing emissions. In terms of setting a target, as I mentioned, this is, tricky in terms of, the political wins and where we're at right now, both, as a region and at a federal level. But so we sort of set up the target in the plan as this range in between where we're at currently and the doubling down scenario, saying we want to continue to push towards the doubling down scenario, but our target is really conceived of as the range that represents progress. And this, we're not going to go through the impacts for each of these measures. I just wanted to show you how this was laid out for the two more transportation related measures that Kelly showed. So the same scenarios, just broken down by each of those Big 10 actions. So this is for the action related to the conversion to low and zero emissions vehicles. And if we were to do that, if we were to sort of continue on our current trend or double the pace at which we're doing that now, we would see either a 9% or 18% reduction in that area. There's also for each of the 10 actions, there's the calculations for 2030 and for 2050 of the potential reductions in criteria air pollutants and hazardous air pollutants and some other air pollutants as well. And that was one of the requirements of the CCAP as well. The little inset there, that's a bit more detail in terms of the steps, the numbers of vehicles and that we would have to be reducing over those timelines as well. And then for our compact development measure, same thing, same scenarios where we would be, at current trend of about 8%, 0.8%. And this one's maybe a little less clear than the previous one was based on our rate of adoption of low and zero emissions vehicles and how that would, play out over time. This one's more based on our reduction of VMT based on having more, densely developed communities. So it's really based on that calculation and the use of, fuel to get around that we came to these calculations. So each of the actions have kind of their metric that represents like the main emissions coming from that and what can be done to reduce that are used to come up with a predictor. And this is sort of our grand total of all those the projections for each of those 10 big actions. You'll see it's broken down by our current emissions relative to each of those sectors, which is at about 12.7 million metric tons for our region. And then the potential reduction if we were implementing, this is sort of based on the implementation of that doubling down scenario. So if we doubled down on our climate mitigation action over the next 25 years, and then the final columns are related to those other air pollutants that would be sort of co-benefits along with our emissions reduction. All right, and then the final thing, just very briefly in terms of our implementation toolkit, I think all of us planners want the plans that we put together to be useful. And so, we try to conceive of this as sort of the quick start guide that you go to in the back of your instructions manual. So if I'm interested in one of these actions or a couple of them for different types of stakeholders, how can I flip through this and kind of get some information on different elements of this that can help us get started. So the implementation toolkit, it's organized for local governments, community-based organizations, businesses, and individual households. So it kind of repeats those four types of stakeholders times the different actions. Practical steps for getting started, and identifies some funding and other types of resources that can support that. There's also a section of about I think it's 8 pages on workforce analysis, looking at the key industries that we're going to need to implement this set of actions over the next 25 years, where there's, opportunities or a surplus of, in-demand professions and where there may be gaps as well, and some strategies for closing those gaps. And then finally, a set of progress indicators. Those are actually included with each of the 10 measures. There's usually 3 to 5 progress measures. That's a single data point, something that we know we'll be able to find that will help us track our progress for each of those over time. But then we've also summarized that in the back. So this says, for each of these 10 big actions, here's the data that we're going to track to show our progress over time and in which direction do we want to go. So I think we have a screenshot of the progress indicators. It's kind of laid out. It looks like there's probably about 30 or 40 of them all told, organized by each of our 10 big actions. I'll hand back to Kelly.
A lot of information. So thanks for your attention to it. We certainly want to answer any questions that folks may have stemming from the review. And then again, the action today is first to answer any questions, but seek permission from this body to initiate the 30-day public review. Yeah.
In terms of, identify that vehicle are number one cause. And I noticed some of the action really goes to no or low emission vehicles. But is there anything in the plan that really addresses overall vehicle miles traveled in the region? So, clearly I my background, right, and from here originally, but lived in New York, lived in DC, much more compact, dense environments. Is there anything in the plan that promotes infill development over what we're now into the X-burbs, right? Where we're plowing over agricultural land to build new suburban homes. But really, it seems like a more aggressive approach would be to address that issue and promote, and maybe this is just me, and sure, the city of Buffalo has the same issue about, promoting more infill development versus new development out of the experts.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes in with that sort of low, or I should say, compact walkable forms of development. When you kind of get into that section, it does talk about, zoning tweaks to promote infill opportunities and the like. So that's sort of where that is lifted up. But
combined with a limiting of expert development or any just suggestions.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I think it's a combination of sort of like land use and zoning improvements to promote the type of development you're talking about. The carbon sequestration of are there areas of conservation out there that we can capture before, it's maybe sold off for the type of development and sprawl that, we've seen a lot of. So there's a couple different things, but it's a good comment, and maybe we can just kind of go back and make sure that the infill piece and stuff is called out maybe more directly.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like a carrot and a little bit less of a stick approach, in the sense of there's not, it gets a little sensitive in telling people put limits on this, but I think we did, try to emphasize, not just our cities, but our town centers and villages, our key areas of focus, but also, like Kelly mentioned, the land use components that at a, local government level, sort of calling out some of those potential, land use restrictions that can be used to check sprawl.
Yeah, because it really impacts, not only does it impact vehicle miles traveled, but it impacts agricultural land.
Absolutely.
New builds. And certainly, it covers multiple, and it's TMD, right?
Yeah. Well,
all of that.
It's all of that.
All encompassed into one, right?
Yeah, and it adds to our emissions, but it also adds to our bottom line. It's more infrastructure that we have to pay for and maintain over time as a region, and we're not really growing.
Correct.
We kind of started up there, but we were kind of leveling out. So again, more infrastructure and not as much of a tax base as we kind of need to keep the engine going when there's so much to maintain, as we all know around this table, when it comes to the tip, with over 50% of our tip just going to maintain kind of what we have. So it's a very valid point. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on this. I mean, this is a great plan. And of course, the transportation and cars and vehicle miles travel is a big part of it. It's the one thing that hasn't improved so far. And, we have some opportunities here. If you look at the NFTA's report for the extending the light rail out to Amherst, we have a light rail in Buffalo, which has the same capacity as a 6-lane expressway. It's a real opportunity other cities don't have. We're thrilled that the NFTA is extending that. You look at their current plan, the EIS, this just came out, it had very significant reductions in vehicle miles traveled. And that's out to Amherst. If we can also extend it to the airport through the east side, which is in the plan to study after this thing gets going, maybe even to the south towns as well, it'll be a huge, benefit in terms of vehicle miles traveled. It's the only opportunity we really have. The other thing is, and I'll mention it, is the Kensington Expressway. Let's get rid of the darn thing and, put it back to a park and use the arterials, which have the capacity. That will encourage people to get out of their cars, because this is a great plan, but if we don't start making some tough decisions, we're not going to get there. So we have some opportunities to make some tough decisions. I hope we can do it, and we want to work with everybody here to make it happen.
Anybody else? Yes.
I've been through it.
Thank you.
It's a lot. Everyone there. You're right. It's a lot of information. But what I wasn't seeing is how us as a transportation organization incorporates or helps all these other. You looked at 10 things.
Mhm.
there's only one transportation one. How do we fit in to all these other things?
Right. So it's, you can look at it that way, but all those other things often influence what we're trying to do around this table too. So it's working with those other sectors. But we have a lot of power around this table. I know you guys focus on transportation, but your partners are in planning, land use and zoning. And so what we're saying here is, how do we collectively as agencies implement that? And so it's not only kind of working with the private sector, you know, and community nonprofits, but with, I think, in our own agencies, it's going to take DPW, you know, environment and planning and folks coming together to reinforce actions and get us collectively kind of moving in the right direction.
And there's another aspect of it that I think that's the broad answer. We need to have everyone at the table with our organizations. The specific to transportation answer that I've been thinking through of, like, you know, what is the specific thing we can do? I think in our next take at the long range plan, we do look more specifically at what we can do to the transportation system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And a lot of that is, we're building the conduits to get to different places. So we can't, like, just narrow roads and stop people from trying to get between downtown and wherever, or, you know, Niagara Falls and wherever. But there are things from a land use perspective that planning boards, town boards, and other people can really need to start thinking about. If we're going to move in a different direction with greenhouse gas emissions, we can use the long range plan to lay that out.
And certainly not just from, I mean, I'm not necessarily a transportation planner. I'm sort of broad, is that, like, you know, looking at our infrastructure and how we're building our infrastructure just in terms of, you know, and I'm thinking of a way to phrase this, but just in terms of the amount of infrastructure that we allot to vehicles and the times and delays of vehicles, like, and we all strive to be A students, right? So we all want our roadways to flow freely, but, you know, do we need to build out the infrastructure to such that we are creating the easiest flow for PMTs and almost encouraging expert developments through that? And are there ways that we can tweak the plans to, I don't know, it's a lot political, but it's not quite as easy as what I'm saying, right? But I mean, just as an example, when we were when I was in New York City, like the emphasis there, and again, it's a whole different animal, but was to remove roadways and provide that space to pedestrians and others to utilize. So that's the other way, just thinking in a more comprehensive manner in terms of what we're planning.
Yeah, that's what it is. I go back to, like, the engineers built the conduits that the land use dictated. That's how we got here. So if we're going to change how the transportation system functions and reduce vehicle miles traveled, we have to change how the land use functions so that the transportation system can function differently. Right now, it's functioning for the way that we have the land use. We built the roads to get people to what we've built. So, and that's very comprehensive. That requires a lot of people thinking differently than they've thought in the past 40 years. At least.
Maybe a little longer.
Probably since, you know, we built the highway. So.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay.
We still need to vote.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Matter of also make a motion to initiate the 38 public review and commentary.
DOT second. All right, motion made and seconded. Are there any other comments or questions on this topic?
I just wanted to thank the team. They've been excellent. Ellie and the UBR team, Josh, they're professionals. So look forward to working together on the next steps.
Anything else? All in favor? Opposed? We'll move.
Thank you, everyone.
Work participation plan update.
Hey, everybody. Just quickly wanted to let you know that we are in the process of updating our public participation plan. So some of the key changes that you see within the document, and we do have a copy of the document in front. I think all of you got a draft copy as well last week. So one was really initiated through this update is we do have specific references to Facebook Live in terms of how we are reaching out to members of the public or allowing the public to participate virtually. So we want to basically keep that kind of generic that we are, definitely want to have people participate, want to be able to offer online platforms because it's always changing. We're just kind of getting rid of the word Facebook Live, and we're going to try some different ways of getting people to engage. As part of this update too, we just replaced the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which we referred to for a few years now, to the Long Range Transportation Plan. Same thing, different name, and that is just to make sure that we're being consistent across all of our planning documents. And the third, we did remove some references to some of the rescinded executive orders. So EO 12898 was rescinded in January. EO 13166 was rescinded, I believe, in March. So just updating our plan with the most current legislation. I just want to point out that 13166, although it's not required for us as an MPO to have an LEP plan, we do. We still have our approved plan, and we're still going to be utilizing it as part of our public participation process. So just those are the main key changes. And today's action, actually I'll open it to questions. Are any questions? Straightforward. So today's action would be to initiate the 45-day public review and comment period. 45 days is required, but are required for public participation plan delivery.
Move it.
Mayor also make a motion to move. 5-day public.
Eric County also.
Motion made and seconded. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? So moved. Rich.
Yes, thank you. But I'd like to today talk about our updated draft governance and operations plan. So this plan documents the composition, organization, responsibilities, procedures governing the operations of the GBNRTC. So GBNRTC goes back to the original regional planning board. Back in the late 60s, there was a transportation subcommittee. That was pretty much where we were born from. We were originally named the Niagara Frontier Transportation Committee. Some federal funding became available in the late 60s, early 70s. The feds pretty much wanted planning to be done before major transportation investments were made. So the concept of the Metropolitan Planning Organization came about. The GBNRTC, or at that time called the NFTC, talked about some different alternatives on how they would be organized. Finally came upon the format that we're in currently now, with an executive director, a professional staff serving our member agencies. The regional planning board was originally a member. They were our 8th member. That's no longer in existence. So we're currently have 7 members. So going back throughout the old documents, there wasn't a lot of formal bylaws and rules and regulations. They came up with pretty loose structure, which was followed for several years. In 2006, I believe, we updated one of the House initiatives was to update those procedures. There's an updated framework for governance, which was then updated again in 2010, and it hasn't been updated since. So we're 15 years now. We're due for an update. There's been lots of changes. The transportation planning. Between different requirements, including the work program, the TIP, the long range transportation plan, which Amy talked about, and then some other requirements that we need to incorporate into our transportation planning, such as Title VI, public participation plan, and performance-based planning. So all of that was included. In addition, we talked about the different procedures in which different documents get approved, how they get approved, and how long public review needs to be for all of those different documents. So this has been going on for about a year. I've been working on this. I incorporated, as I said, a lot of those old documents. I talked to Rochester, Syracuse, and Albany MPOs to see how they do things. So we did a case study of all of those, picked out some best practices. There's also been some national MPO surveys. Every 7 years, the feds do a survey of MPOs to talk about how they're set up. So a review of that information as well. And we came up with a draft document. So that draft document was already reviewed by our members. There was a 30-day member review. All suggestions from the members as well as senior staff were incorporated into the plan, and that's what led us to today's draft. So highlighting some changes, we've gone through some of these. So there's a lot of requirements, as I mentioned. So all of those different requirements are laid out, including the CFR, which are the official federal regulations that requirements that MPOs should undertake. Shall, they always use the word shall. Revised, updated bylaws. So we never really had bylaws. We had a PCC bylaw because there was no policy committee when the NFTC was originally formed. So we've gone through and we've laid out official bylaws for the GBNRTC to hold. Oh, by the way, GBNRTC 1999, we changed names from NFTC to GBNRTC. For anyone, was anyone around at that time? Just as an old timer. Okay, and I said clarity on the approval process and the voting procedures, lots of references to the public participation plan. So as we see on the right side of the screen here, it's organized into some major sections. The introduction talks about what MPOs are, where MPOs are located in New York State. We then get into all of the regulations, laws, and requirements we must follow, and then our structure and our function. So that goes through a lot of things, such as our vision, our voting membership, our regional stakeholders, committees, working groups, central staff, communications, our host agency, which is NFTA, our use of consultants, how work items are approved, and how things are voted upon. We also added NITEC as a regional strategic stakeholder, so that we now have 4 regional strategic stakeholders. So those are basically non-voting members of our PCC. And that's about all. So with that, we'd like to initiate a 30-day public review of this document. And hopefully in November, we will be up for a vote.
For the 4
Seneca Nation, the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, and the Empire State Development Corporation, and NITEC.
NITEC's the star student. Seneca Nation's been very engaged when they can. They're so busy. They come on sometimes, but we also go down and meet with them. Empire State Development and the partnership, we have engaged, but I think we're still trying to figure out exactly what the future of that looks like. But NITEC's a no-brainer as a huge stakeholder. We're kind of questioning, like, why didn't we think of this before? But I think, how long did I put around? If 2010 was the last 30, okay, that's right, it's your anniversary.
Any other questions?
You make a motion to.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any other comments? All in favor?
Well,
Opposed? All right, on to discussion items. Back to Rich.
All right, I was just informed that we're running long, so we're going to postpone discussion item D. We'll save that for a future meeting. Discussion item A is our TPS action approvals. So the first was 576476, the Village of Williamsville Main Street Sidewalk Project. Due to prolonged preliminary design and right-of-way incidental phases, the let will need to be slipped from FFY 25 to FFY 26. That was approved as AdMod 118. And second, 576418, bridge painting and vertical down and light vector substructure 5 bridges. Due to approval to advertise being not received on time, the slat will also need to slip from FFY 25 to 26. And that was approved as AdMod number 119. We do have one item in public review right now, if you care to look it over and send comments. This is 501025 US 20 at New York 400 and US 20A at New York 78 intersections. This project will improve operations and safety at those intersections. The request at this time will only add preliminary design phase to the current tip. The remaining phases and funding will be added during the tip update process. And the beginning of the construction will begin in anticipated 5/28. Constraint is maintained as $335,000 of matched NHPP and HSIP funds will be transferred from a pavement maintenance block fund. ICG, Interagency Consultation Group for Air Quality Conformity, has been contacted for a transportation conformity exemption code, and they agreed with the recommended A6 Highway Safety Improvement Program implementation code. Public review will continue on this project until close of business on September 1st. Next item is our FFY 2630 tip approval schedule. So as many of you know, public review ended June 2nd for the tip. We did receive a lot of questions and comments on DOT projects, in particular the Switch Aqueduct project. Those comments were sent to DOT main office in Albany, and we're currently still awaiting official response to those comments. Once response is received, we'll need approximately 2 weeks to send responses to all commenters and update the draft tip document. The conformity and the draft tip document will then need to be recommended for approval by PCC, and policy will need to approve those 2 documents as well as the MPO self-certification document. So that's where we stand now.
So we're skipping D?
Yeah, we're gonna skip D for now.
Okay.
So item D is a NISDOT campaign that will help designed to help reduce bridge strikes by trucks. So as I said, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a future meeting.
Before we get away from the tips schedule, it had the final implementation on 10/1. We're still going through this process. What's that do to our final implementation?
Once all the tips are submitted to main office and they're compiled, they go to the feds for a 30-day review. Once the feds have done the 30-day review, they initiate a 30-day court comment period on their end. So once all the tips have been approved by all the different MPOs, and the main office compiles them, sends them in, there's at least a 60-day period where they're going through review by FHWA and then all that again. So it's definitely delayed. That's why we had a discussion in our last meeting about what impact it could be to projects on the proposed tip and how we can find ways to move those forward, so not to delay everything forward. We're looking to do that to make sure that even though it's being delayed, the projects that are critical or need to move, we'll find ways to make that happen so that it doesn't impact project specific issues.
The current tip remains in place until it's replaced. So we have. I believe a year of overlap technically. It won't be stopped. But if there's a new project on the tip that a member wants to advance early in the fall, that's what we gotta work through in detail.
Yeah.
And that's what DOT is committed to do.
We kind of called it internally, we're doing just tip gymnastics. We'll make everything work, it's just a lot of the extra moves and things we gotta do on the back end to make it work, and we'll do that.
One thing to bring out is it's not just projects as well, it's phases, so. If the phases are not, then that's exactly the issue.
And when we're looking at these issues, we're looking at it not project by project, but phase by phase. So we look at a certain project and where it's set to go on a new tip. We look at when each phase is set to be obligated, and if anything needs to be obligated soon, we're looking at that piece by piece. So.
And if my memory serves me, Rich, the local projects meetings are being scheduled relatively soon. That's a great place to talk for everybody to say, this is what I got going on, and we need to facilitate some kind of changes. Tip gymnastics.
Okay, very good. All right, move on to member status reports. Start online with two-way authority.
Yes, I'd just like to let everyone know that I've accepted a new position with the Thruway as a promotion, so we're going to be working on a new representative for the Thruway. More to come on that, but I'll make sure to be there for their first meeting and introduce them. But that's all I have.
Thanks.
We'll miss
Thank you.
John.
I'll still have some involvement though.
DOT.
Just showing things on railway departure, I'm still waiting on some more guidance from the office on when they're gonna roll out awards from what we had submitted. As everyone knows, the amount of interest in the program not meet the threshold target allocation. So we're still wondering how they're gonna spend the remaining dollars and what they're gonna award from what we already submitted. Confident we'll get more than our original target and allocation, but what we get awarded we need to be seen. So I know they're currently working on that in Albany right now as far as how they're gonna frame that award and that press release, and hopefully we'll get something in the very near future.
And for clarity on that, the interest at the statewide level did not meet the target.
Statewide level.
Into the regional level exceeded the regional target, so it's a good thing for our region.
Go ahead.
Buffalo.
Nothing new to report today, thanks.
Yeah.
Just two quick items, check your schedules because they changed on August 31st. And then written comments for the DEIS for Metro Rail expansion are accepted through September 8th. So we still have time.
Erie County, nothing new on this.
Just their annual meeting, and it's our 30th anniversary celebration, September 22nd. If you want to invite, let me know. I'll make sure that it's the details of that.
Great. All right, Pulse.
There's nothing new to report.
Nothing from Iron County. That, get to Mike.
Two quick things. Rich put a good presentation together on commercial truck license requirement enforcement. That's a new, it's not a new requirement, but it's an increased emphasis, I think, of the federal administration. There's information on that we'll be sharing as a follow-up to this. And also yesterday, the 5310 grant solicitation was opened up. I believe it goes to the end of October, beginning of November. We'll be putting together information and sharing all of that, but please do share that information with the stakeholders that your various agencies work with to apply for that funding.
There's 3 webinars coming up, I believe, one next week and 2 the following week that you can sign up for and get some more information if you're interested.
The link that we will send out will have information and direct links for the 3 different webinars that you mentioned.
Are there any members who couldn't stick around for a quick 10-minute conversation after this meeting? If we can't, I could do a virtual, but if we're all here, I'd like to. I'm seeing no one say no, so we will do that. If you could just stay, we'll do a quick bathroom break and then a brief meeting after this. So thank you.